What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Cloud Slayer channel. Hope you guys are doing well. Today, I got another reaction video. This one is going to be Apache Prisoner, what it's like to be kidnapped by the most terrifying Indian tribe. This video is made by Dates and Dead Guys. So, if you guys like their content, I'll have it down in the description below. I'll also leave a link to their channel and all that stuff. So if you guys like them, go give them a like and subscribe. If you like this content, this reaction stuff, hit me up with the like and subscribe as well. I appreciate it. And if you guys want me to see any more videos, I've been into a lot of history stuff lately. I like a lot of these stories about Native Americans and stuff like that. Very interesting. I mean, I grew up with a lot of family members talking about it, speculation, stuff like that. Sometimes speculation isn't just speculation. It might have been something that happened, but was never recorded. You know what I mean? So it's great to talk about. So, and it's great to hear and various things like that. So we'll jump into this. I know a lot of people don't like talking, whatever, but it is what it is. So here we go. Dates and Dead Guys, subscribe, like them. I'll put the link down below.
Welcome to Dates and Dead Guys. Today our story is about what it would be like to be captured by and live among the Apache. Specifically, we are going to follow Herman Lehman. After his capture, at just 11 years old in 1870, he will forget all about his old world, as over the course of 9 years, he has to fight for survival in his place among the Indians. But before we get started, I researched...
That's pretty crazy. That's like that Cynthia Ann Parker from the Summer Moon. Let's see here. That book. It's a very good book. It's S.E. Gwen. He wrote that book, I believe. Let me look it up right quick. It is Empire of the Summer Moon. I do recommend that. I'll put the link down below if you guys want to pick up a copy, ebook, audiobook, whatever. It's over on Amazon. Not that expensive. Use your credit. You know what I mean? Especially if you're interested in those kind of histories and stuff like that. So it's about the last Apache war chief for those guys. So it's very good read.
Research historical topics I find interesting and explain them in a way I would to my friends. If that is your kind of thing, please subscribe and leave a like on the video. If you really like it, share it. It supports me and it will help grow the channel. But let's get to our story. It's May 1870. Herman's mother sends him, his brother Willie, and his sister Caroline into their family's wheat field to scare away the birds. After a job well done, the kids sat down in the field to play.
I remember I was in school. I was a young man, right? I'm 30 now, 31, but I was probably in second grade at most, second or third grade. I can't remember the teacher's name, but she had like a master's degree or something. No, it had to be sixth grade then. It was like Miss Backlund or something like that, but she told us that they made scarecrows so that they didn't have to like risk having the children go out there and get taken by like Native Americans and stuff like that. And I remember I told my mom that, and because she was saying that natives were just, you know, savages running around scalping people and stuff like that, and like my mom got offended. So I know there's this big thing where it says like natives didn't, that, you know, that we didn't just go around just scalping people pointlessly and we were peaceful and stuff like that. But, you know, sometimes these things are documented from other Native Americans, but you don't know the truth, you know, like they say, the victors decide how history is written, right? So
by the time they saw them, they were already surrounded. Herman later recalled, quote, "When we saw their hideous painted faces, we were terribly frightened, and some of us pulled for the house. Willie was caught right where he was sitting. Caroline ran toward the house. The Indians shot at her several times, and she fell. They chased me for a distance and caught me. I yelled and fought manfully when the chief, Conaviste, laid hold upon me, and a real scrap was pulled off right there. The Indians slapped me, choked me, beat me, tore my clothes off. I thought he was going to kill me." End quote.
Typically, they wouldn't take any prisoners or anything like that, right?
Apache stripped both boys naked and threw them on the backs of their horses. The boys were cut up as the raiding party stampeded through briars, thorns, and catclaws, and the endless ride left them sunburned. Thinking back to the time, Herman wrote, quote, "Death just then would have been a relief to me." End quote. This is a dangerous world, and not that.
Heck yeah, it is. I mean, what was it, like the Wild West and stuff like that? Especially if you're like the Great Plains and stuff like that, Native American, Caucasian, it didn't matter, you know. Man, it's very scary, you know, like you realize what kind of a pampered life that we lead nowadays, you know, you just go in your house, but I mean, people can break in and stuff like that, but it's nowhere near like this, so.
That long ago. In 1870, the Apache and Comanche still roamed the plains. Murders and kidnappings of settlers on the frontier were still a regular occurrence. His story comes down to us through a book, 9 Years Among the Indians, in which Herman Lehman himself tells his story of survival decades later. After they were captured, Herman and Willie were painted and dressed as Apache and then separated. Willie's group ran into a group of Texas Rangers. While the Rangers pursued the group, the horse Willie was on was weakening, and the Apache, riding with him, threw him off to lighten the load and escape. The Rangers either didn't see Willie, or they thought he was an Indian child because he was dressed like one. Either way, he was left.
You would think well, I guess he's 11-year-old, right? They might have, but if they seen Indian children back then, they said they would just kill him on sight, right? So, I don't know, that's weird.
On his own. At just 8 or 9 years old, he was able to make his way to a road, and after failing to wave down a few travelers, he eventually was able to hitch a ride to a nearby town and make his way home. Herman was not so lucky. He was forced to eat raw meat, which made him vomit regularly. This displeased the chief, Carnaviste, and he was regularly beaten. To keep him from running away, the Apache tell him his family is dead, all killed in the raid.
But didn't they speak a different language back then, you know? Like, or did they teach them some of the language? You know, I don't know. Unless they had translators, of course, but yeah. I thought it was less common for natives to speak English, you know? So I don't know what kind of information is back then, so I could be wrong, obviously. I didn't live back then.
Also tie him to stakes, face down, with his arms stretched out, and they put a large stone on his back to keep him from moving as they sleep. Herman was afraid, tortured, and he believed everyone he loved was dead. Night after night, they traveled in the same manner, for weeks. Sometimes they would go days without food. Herman became more accustomed to raw meat, and over time it seemed the Apache were kinder to him, until they reached the village. There, in a frightening scene where guns are firing and people are shouting and dancing all around, Herman is grabbed. The Apache forcefully pierced his ears with hot irons, cut his hair, and beat him until he passes out. When Herman woke the next day, he had been bathed and oiled. Confused, he looked around. He saw an Apache, and he was taken to a feast on the ground where a blanket had been spread. In front of him was sun-baked bread, roasted meat, and raw meat. As he sat there, the Apache just stared at him. He had to make a choice. Herman writes, quote, "Either on account of my extreme hunger or divine providence, I seized the raw meat and began to eat. That pleased the Indians, and they immediately began to pat me. Had I first touched the cooked food, the bread, the palencia, and the roasted meat, the food of civilized man, I would likely have been tortured to death." And
that's crazy how they give him like kind of like an ultimatum. You know what I mean? That's for somebody so young. That's crazy.
End quote. The Apache were elated. They cheered and made it clear Herman had pleased them. They even gave Herman an Apache name, Enda, meaning white boy. It wasn't a clever name, but Herman was happy to have not been killed. He became a servant to Carnaviste, fetching water, lighting his pipe, and taking care of his daily needs. He was also forced to wrestle.
Sometimes when you got to do that, though, too, they're kind of teaching you how to be them, you know?
Wrestle with Apache boys. Herman was scrappy, and the Apache liked that about him. Herman was growing more accepted by the Apache, but he still lived in terror. At one point, he was entrusted to watch over a small herd of horses. At his lowest moment, alone, he would just sit there in a prairie and cry. He wrote about what he was feeling. Quote, "Civilized people call it homesickness. I would sit there on my pony and cry. I never cried while I was being tortured, nor when I ran the gauntlet, nor when I nearly drowned. In all those times, I gave a yell of defiance or a snarl of vengeance. But now, in my loneliness and desolation, I could weep. A new thought struck me, and my tears vanished. A smile flitted over my face. I made up my mind to escape.
Dude, those are some tough fucking words, you know. Like, even though these guys are beating me, I'm not gonna give them what they want, and that's to see me cry. But when I'm alone, you know, let that shit out. Very, very tough person, you know. They're way different than what most people are today.
End quote. Herman grabbed a water bag and took off on the horse allotted to him. He headed east at a gallop. It didn't take long for the tribe to notice. They'd been expecting this. It was a test. He had a head start, but his horse tripped and he was overtaken by his pursuers. He was tied and dragged back to camp. The tribe held council, but again they decided not to kill him. They forced him to sleep tied up for a while, but during the day they assigned boys to him to keep him company. He starts to feel less lonely. Over time, he learned the language, and Carnavistia's wife, Laughing Eyes, lavished him with affection. She had no son of her own, and as an 11-year-old boy, Herman welcomed the motherly tenderness. The Apache began to teach him
Didn't have any children, so she took them in as her own in a way, I suppose.
valuable skills, like how to make a bow and arrows, and maybe most importantly, how to make a shield out of buffalo skin. Part of this may have just been to shoot at him, which they do, to check to see if the shield works. After a while,
Trial and error. Oh man, trial by fire, I suppose.
they start taking him on raids. At first, he is just fodder. The Apache come across a horse they want to steal, but are not sure where the ranchers are. Send Herman. He's expendable. But when he kept on being successful, he started to gain some respect. While with a war party, Herman and a group of Apache come across 4 Mexican buffalo hunters on foot. They charged after them. A few made their way toward cover, but one panicked and fled out in the open. The Apache captured him. In Spanish, he tells the Apache where his camp is and that it's empty. Going for supplies, the Apache left the Mexican with Herman to watch.
So they knew how to translate Spanish as well. That's pretty cool. I guess I don't know. Would the Caucasian people be speaking Spanish too at this time? I guess I don't know.
As the war party approached the camp, men inside opened fire. It was a trap. Upon hearing gunshots, the captured Mexican begins throwing rocks at 11-year-old Herman. Herman fired his arrow at him, hitting him in the arm, and the man surrenders. Seeing that the camp is a bit more defended than they had been led to believe, the Apache retreated back to where Herman was keeping the Mexican. He tells Carnavisti about the Mexican throwing rocks at him, and he goes into a rage and orders Herman to kill him. Herman raised his bow and sent an arrow through the man's heart. It's the first person he ever killed. Not satisfied, Carnavisti orders Herman to take the man's scalp. Fearing punishment, he does that too. For the Apache, he was one of them now. And for Herman, there was no turning back.
Initiation, I guess, in a way.
As Herman was sinking into his new life among the Apache, the world was changing around him. He was captured in 1870, at the height of the Indian Wars in the West. With each passing season, the Americans gained a stronger foothold and established their presence more and more. It wasn't uncommon for the Apache to go to reservations, even for a short time, as they would be forced there by the Americans. The growing pressure seemed constant, as they were consistently working to avoid rangers, soldiers, and the Mexican rurales. The condensed space led to common tension between the Apache and the Comanche. Battles were common, but so were treaties for peace. Gambling was actually a common solution. Herman would race Comanche boys on horseback or be forced to wrestle them. These would be starting points for negotiation between groups. Even rival Apache bands would fight each other over resources and territory. And as these larger forces played themselves out, one small thing will play a constant role in the background. Although the Apache...
I don't know, a lot of people say Comanches were really strong too, you know?
had told him different. Herman's family was alive. When he saw his sister fall in the field, she was only playing dead. And as they rode off with Willie and Herman, they were never able to kill his family. For the entire time Herman was gone, his mother would never stop looking for him, checking every fort and reservation for word on a white boy among the Indians. But let's get back to Herman. After 3 years with the Apache, Herman was one of them. He feared and hated white people. He hardly remembered his old life and had forgotten his old name and native language. During those years, he had chances to escape, but that wasn't what he wanted anymore. He wanted to be a respected member of the tribe, and an incident with Texas Rangers will give him an opportunity to earn that. When Herman was 4,
I'm sorry to cut this guy off, but the Empire of the Summer Moon it's about the Comanche, not the Apaches. I believe the Comanches were better, weren't they? I don't know. It's kind of weird.
14, he was with a small party of Apache that were caught off guard by Texas Rangers. Herman fled along with some others, but his horse was shot, and when it fell, it landed on top of him. He pleaded for his friends to help him, but seeing he was trapped, they took his bow and ran off without him. Herman thought the Rangers would kill him, but when they ran up to him, they noticed he was white. Seeing him trapped, the Rangers agreed to go after the fleeing Apache and come back for Herman. The Rangers made it only a couple hundred yards before returning to the spot where Herman was trapped under the horse. But he was gone. Vanished. One of the Rangers, Thomas P. Gillespie, related the story years later to a magazine. He wrote of Herman's escape, quote, "At this they were puzzled beyond expression. The scene of the fight and the chase was an open plain, with nothing to obstruct the view for miles, and from the moment the horse was killed until their return to the spot they had been in full view of the surroundings, and the boy could not have gotten away without their having seen him make the start. There were a few scattering mesquites, but none large enough to offer concealment. The grass was green and 7 or 8 inches high, and into this he must have crawled and secreted himself. The search began, and in a short time the entire company came up and all joined in the hunt. Every square rod for a mile around was gone over, and every bush and tuft of grass was examined. But the boy was nowhere to be found, and we gave up the search as hopeless, and went away completely mystified as to what had become of him." End quote. The Apache may be the most elusive group to have ever lived, and in 3 years, Herman had mastered the skill. Herman had managed to drag himself out from under the horse, staying low to the ground. He crawled until he found a depression in the field, concealed himself with grass, and stayed hidden until they left. With his group of Apaches having fled, Herman is all alone, with no supplies and no horse.
Imagine that, just trying to dig deep and try to get out from beneath the beast, a fucking horse as big as crap.
He traveled 300 miles by himself to make it back to his tribe. I know I said this before,
That is insane.
but he is only 14 years old.
14 years old, he traveled that many miles, man. Some people can't even do that in a month.
When he makes it back, he is looked at by his tribe like a ghost. His comrades had told a story to his tribe that Herman had been killed and that they had buried him. Seeing that they had lied and, in reality, abandoned him, Carnoviste instead made Herman a petty chief in the tribe. He had gained his respect, but all good things come to an end. In just
Made him a petty chief. That's cool. I didn't know they had like such ranks, but
a few short years, the amount of white encroachment on the territory was obvious. The presence of the American military made life very difficult for the Apache. They looked for new territory, some place they hoped the white people would never go. They found safer lands, but they were barren and didn't have enough food to support them. In one case, they found a perfect spot. There was plenty of water and game, but occasionally they would also find a strange yellow metal. Carnoviste wisely knew there was no long-term solution there.
I don't know about these guys, but being like Ojibwe, we held copper in a higher regard than we did gold, so
The Americans would come. At one point, the military was able to force the Apache to the Fort Sill reservation. Oddly, a Comanche, the famous Quanah Parker, was the one who persuaded them to surrender to the military.
Oh, Quanah Parker, his mother. Then wasn't that where Cynthia Ann Parker came in?
They were there for a short time, but hating the treatment there, they attempt one last run for freedom. In the middle of the night, the Apache fled the reservation. Not nicely, they killed several soldiers on the way out, but they travel 100 miles west to make their final stand against the soldiers pursuing them, and they make short work of it. Quote, "The Indians decoyed them off on a route where there was no water. We knew what the consequences would be. So at the spring, we filled up our water bags and pursued the soldiers. Soon, we began to find dead horses on the way. Then, we came upon a man nearly famished for water. He was stripped, scalped, and cut into pieces. We followed and found 8 others, and they shared the same fate as the first mentioned. These soldiers passed close to the water, but it was in a deep hole, and the Indians kept it covered up. We saw, from the direction the other soldiers were traveling, that they would all perish on the dry sand. So we went back to the right trail of our people. We found them at the spring." End quote. Initially, the Apache thought that they were free, but the problem now was one they had faced before. They couldn't stay here. The land was uninhabitable. There wasn't enough water or game. The Apache the group had found there were already in a deplorable condition, half starving and cold. They stayed for a short time, but it was clear they would all die if they continued down this course. After holding council, the band decided to return to Fort Sill, a choice that will spell their doom. One nice thing about reservation was that getting whiskey was pretty easy. One bad thing was that getting whiskey was pretty easy. The bands that exist here, although they are mostly Apache, don't all get along. Tribes are not just one people. They are groups with a similar language and culture. And
Oh, firewater, man, that's still messing people up, especially the Native American community, but probably not like fentanyl and stuff like that, so.
sometimes they fight. One group in particular fought with Herman's band a lot. They would torment them, especially one of the medicine men. One night, the rival band came to visit our group after a big party. Herman calls it a carousel. They demanded to be given whiskey, and a fight breaks out between the two groups. One of our Apache was wounded. Honor demands the blood be repaid, so our group goes to the rival camp and steals their beer. Another larger fight breaks out, and it has to be broken up by the soldiers. Now the authorities are involved, and Herman's group knows that punishment is coming. They don't want to deal with that, so they plan to run away again. But before they do, another shipment of whiskey comes in. Staying one more night couldn't hurt anybody, right? That carousel
It's always when you let your guard down.
was the worst I have ever witnessed. Herman describes a scene of drunken madness. Women literally fighting each other over infidelity result in the death of several of them. In a riled up state, the men attacked the rival band before...
Infidelity, man, that's crazy. So, does that mean that not all Native groups were just out there, just giving out the love, you know what I mean?
or packing up all the materials their horses can carry and booking it off reservation for the Plains region. A day later, the rival band catches up to them. They fend off the attackers, and as they retreat, our Apache pursue them. But the attack was a ruse. They were run right into an ambush. Quote, Indians seemed to rise up out of the ground and fire at us. All of our comrades were killed. We turned and retreated slowly, a kind of running fight, to within a quarter mile of camp. 2 or 3 came up with us, and we had a hand-to-hand combat. Lances, spears, and tomahawks flew lively for a while, but I was too busy to take much notice of what was going on around me. End quote. In the middle of the battle, Carnaviste steps in to stop a warrior attacking Herman with a spear. In the process, he is run through himself by the rival band's medicine man. At this, Herman is left to face off against the man alone. Herman already feared this man, and he was always
It's crazy. Even the medicine men were out there fighting, you know?
told medicine men couldn't be killed. Quote, when Carnaviste fell, this medicine man came toward me with a Winchester, and waving his shield, he said to me, "This is your last day, for now you die." I ran behind a big rock and replied, "You are me." End quote. Seeing the medicine man go after Herman, the remaining Apache, having dispatched the rest of the enemy, head for the camp. Herman is just 15 years old. They were confident their medicine man would be able to win and rejoin them in a moment. Herman was armed with a bow, so we have an awkward situation where both are circling a big rock trying to get off a shot. Rounds from the Winchester are ricocheting off the rocks, just
All his buddy left him too because they were so confident in a medicine man doing that stuff.
missing Herman. Then, after circling the rock 3 or 4 times, Herman is able to get a shot off with his bow. It hits home, right under the shield of the medicine man. He lay on the ground bleeding, begging for mercy. Herman put one more arrow in his heart. Herman grabbed his gun and all of his ammo before running off to hide. Killing a medicine man was a big deal. The rival Apache would be after him. Herman sat on a mountaintop thinking. For hours after the body of the medicine man was discovered, the rival Apache searched for him. All of the men in his band were dead, and there was no joining another. They would know he had killed the medicine man. One of them would come for him no matter what band he joined. he would never be safe with the Apache again. So, he made a decision. After the search party had left, he snuck back into camp, gathered all the supplies he could carry, and managed to steal the fastest horse they had, a beautiful gray stallion. With nowhere to go, Herman rides off to survive in the wilderness alone.
That's crazy. He knew that if he tried to go to a different tribe, they'd still be trying to get him anyways, or not even just a tribe, but other Apaches, because they'd probably just sell him out because, could be because of the color of his skin.
With everyone in his band killed, the rest of the Apache wanting him dead and fearing the white people, Herman had no real viable options. He traveled for many days before finding a narrow canyon with a stream and cottonwood trees. There was game, and he was able to use a cavern in the canyon walls as a shelter. He stayed there for 8 months, all alone, except for his horse. You can't stay like this forever. Eventually, he got his push. One night, during a full moon, he's in his shelter, and as he's trying to sleep, he keeps hearing voices. He thinks that it's just his mind playing tricks on himself. They are faint. But then he hears a loud laugh, and his heart drops. Herman creeps out of his cave, and a few hundred yards down the canyon, he sees a fire, and in it human shapes are moving around in the darkness. Using rocks for cover, he makes his way closer to investigate. They are Apache, and he knows each and every one of them. They know he killed the medicine man, and if they find him, they will kill him.
What does he know? What does he mean by knows each and every one of them?
Herman quietly gathered as much as he could pack.
Just remembers their faces from when they fought or something? That might be it.
His horse, and then he rode away, this time riding north, into the range of the buffalo, Comanche territory. It was time to take his chances with them. At this point in the story, Herman is still only around 15 years old, and like many 15-year-olds, he doesn't have a great plan. He intends to find a Comanche village, ask them if he can join their tribe, and hopefully not get murdered. The Comanche often like to murder trespassers, and they are very good at it, so there is some risk.
Plus, he was raised as Apache, so I don't see why they would trust him.
Oh, and he doesn't speak the language. He intends to use hand gestures.
Of course, that too.
An expression to get his point across, and just hope someone there knows ASL. Or, I guess, NASL. No one is going to get that joke. Herman has no idea how or when he is going to find the Comanche, but one creepy night lets him know that he is getting close. Quote, "One night I could hear wild animals running, and the scream of something like a
American
panther.
Sign Language.
But I did not think it was that kind of animal. It didn't sound right. Then the wolves began to hound, and they did not sound exactly right. I was pretty sure Indians were near, but the imitations were not of my tribe. I lay perfectly still, listening. Rattlesnakes seemed more numerous than usual, and I could hear them rattling all around. The whole animal world seemed to be disturbed. I silently secured my horse, threw on my equipment, and stole away in the darkness. Next morning, I saw many Indian signs. I must have been close to a large party." End quote. I don't blame him for not wanting to meet the Comanche that way, but his way wasn't much better. Now that he knows they're in the area, it doesn't take him long to track them. He stalks them for a while, and one night he sneaks into their camp. He sees a group of warriors seated around a campfire telling stories, laughing and joking. He watches them, and he notes how little laughter there was among the Apache. He musters up all of his courage and just walks in among them. Not expecting a visitor, it takes the Comanche a moment to realize what has happened. Then, seemingly, all at once, the warriors jump up to their feet, let out a war whoop, and run away. Herman just stands there in the firelight like an idiot. He writes, quote, "I must have been a vicious-looking Indian. Long, dangling hair, uncouth and unkept.
Might have thought he was a ghost or something. Like, fuck this. Crazy white dude."
There I stood, wondering if they would come back and try to kill me." End quote. In a short time, they do come back, charging and yelling. Unable to speak the language, Herman tries to make signs that he's peaceful. He is sure they are going to kill him. One fierce old woman breaks in front of the men, gesturing for them to do so. But before they do, another Comanche comes forward. He speaks some Apache, and they are able to communicate. Herman tells them his story, about how he was born white and became an Apache, that he loves the Indian and hates the white man, that his tribe was killed, and that the Apache had forsaken him, and that now he wanted to become a Comanche. Amazingly, one of the Comanche remembered him. Herman had beaten him years earlier in one of the horse races Carnavista used to make him do.
Oh, when he was a kid.
Comanche welcomed him to stay the night. It was his first night with people in as much as a year. Over the next few days...
That's kind of crazy to think about, small world, I guess. And, you imagine with all that fighting back then that, it's crazy that you would meet him again. So
Herman travels with the Comanche before they reach the main body of the tribe. Herman makes his case to the chief to become one of them. The chief made Herman promise to perform all the duties of a Comanche warrior, protect the tribe, and obey the chief in all things, in both peace and war. He was even given a Comanche name, Montechina. And for a while, things were good.
What does that mean?
Herman went on raids with the Comanche. He battled the Tonkawa and the American soldiers as he swore he would do. But the same issue that plagued the Apache was true for the Comanche. The American juggernaut was encroaching. Again, Quanah Parker was the voice of reason. The options were to starve as the Americans killed all the buffalo.
Well, that and they took away a lot of the rations from the reservation, because with these guys still raiding and stuff like that, they didn't want to honor any of those things from some of the treaties that they had with the reservations that they ended up setting up with the Native Americans back then. They go into great better detail in the book. So Empire of the Summer Moon, it's great.
Or resigned to reservation. After enough time, it was clear the Indian way of life was over, and they agreed to go. It was there that Herman would be reunited with his family, his white family. In his time with the Comanche, Herman developed a close relationship with many, but was literally adopted into the family of Quanah Parker. He treated him like a son while on reservation, and he lived with them for a couple of years. It was notable that a white man was living among the Comanche on reservation, and word slowly got out. Amazingly, after 9 years, Herman's mother never stopped looking for her son. She had intentionally found herself in the company of General
So he's about 20 when he got back out. That's still real young.
Reynold S. Mackenzie. He knew of a white boy at the Comanche reservation and agreed to have him sent down to her. Herman, however, did not
generated photograph.
agree to be sent down. He was a Comanche through and through and needed some convincing. Herman also believed his family was dead. It's what the Apache had told him. He didn't want to leave, but Quanah pressed him to do so. He promised that he could come back and live with him if it wasn't his family, but he believed life would be better for Herman there than relying on the government on the reservation. Escorted by soldiers, Herman made his way to Loyal Valley, Texas, where his
But he kind of got a lot from the government too, though, right? Quanah Parker. So
family lived. He said that when he left the wagon, 300 people had gathered to greet him. They all spoke a language he didn't understand. They all looked at him. He recalled, quote, "Quite a crowd of people gathered around, and among them was my mother, but I didn't know her. The years of savagery which had passed over my head had erased from my memory." End quote. Neither Herman nor his family.
So for him to write these accounts, it would have took him a long while till he relearn English and stuff like that, huh? I wonder how long it took him to relearn that English and stuff like that, and then recount all that, because you would imagine that he has to learn how to write and all that kind of stuff at 20 years old. So
Recognized each other. At first, they had thought they made a mistake, but then his brother Willie and his sister Mina found a scar on his arm from where she had cut him with a hatchet when they were kids. As they examined it, Herman wrote what happened in his mind. Quote, "The dark curtain of oblivion, which had been drawn so long, was pulled back, and to me, there came a recollection of my early childhood. I was restored. I recognized my brother and sister, and remembered them as my playmates in a far distant past. Then somebody kept saying, 'Herman, Herman,' and that name had a familiar sound. It then occurred to me that that was my own name. Slowly but surely, the mist began to clear away, and I knew I had found my people. But I was an Indian, and I did not like them, because they were palefaces." End quote. It took
I bet you that motherfucker was dark as shit too, but everybody was. They were outside doing shit.
months, maybe years. The timeline isn't clear in the text, but after a long time, Herman is able to rejoin his family. There were some quirks. Initially, he tried to escape a lot. His brother Willie had to stay around him and chase him down and bring him back. He also refused to sleep on a bed, preferring the ground.
You think if he could escape from like Comanches or Apaches and stuff at a young age, he'd be able to escape from his brother or whatever.
A kick out of dressing like a Comanche and
Especially if he's stealthy, like they say Apaches were, you know.
doing war whoops and brandishing his bow at the neighborhood kids. But eventually, the love of his family won him over. They broke through, and he was able to more or less move on with a normal life. But what of the Comanche? Well, that's kind of a fun way to end the story.
So that was actually him all dressed up in the 1920s.
When Herman was 17, 2 years before he was reunited with his family, Quanah Parker's family adopted him. Up until Herman Lehman's death, he was still considered and treated as a full member of their family, visiting them frequently and treated that way accordingly. He was even enrolled as a full member of the Comanche tribe and received tribal benefits from the
Dude, that's fucking crazy. That's awesome too at the same time.
government. In the end, he rejoined his family, but he never lost the Comanches.
You can take the boy out of the Comanches, but you can't take the Comanches out of the boy. I guess technically Apache. So how long was he with the Comanches? Would they say like a couple years? I kind of missed it. So, but I mean, it is what it is. It was still a good story. Really good. So if you guys liked Dates and Dead Guys in this video, this one is Apache Prisoner, what it's like to be kidnapped by the most terrifying Indian tribe. But what was it? Comanches were supposed to be the best. So I don't know. I was kind of confused. But ooh, they got one right there. Should have listened to that one. But it is what it is. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have a good one. And I like listening to a lot of these histories. I do have some in queue that I was looking at. I was interested in this Native American Navajo teachings about giants and stuff like that. I haven't gotten to watch a lot of these, but also trying to find time to do it and then record and stuff like that. You guys understand it, having a job and then working out and all that stuff and raising a family, right? So I hope you guys have a great one. Hit that like and subscribe button, and then you guys have a great day.